Not a morning person, maybe some of you are. I'm pretending to be a morning person right now. Let's see how this goes. But I did want to thank you for coming out first thing. I guess it's good to get out of the hotel before it gets super, super hot, although it was pretty hot when I left. So I'm glad you're all here. What I have planned for the session today is a mix of a couple of different things. I want to talk first about some new or new-ish features in Alma for consortial collaboration. These are mainly features that have been introduced since the end of 2017, so about the November, December point through the July release. There are a couple of interesting things for collaborative networks in the July release. And my thinking here is that I know sometimes when you are working with Alma every day, it's easy to lose track of things that may have been introduced in a release last month or the month before, and you sort of stumble across it. And I know what I do is I'm like, that's cool, that's interesting, I'm gonna look it up when I have time to look it up. And often that doesn't happen right away, or you sort of remember when you get home from work that night, I meant to look up that new really do a dedicated look at some of these new features. So we'll be taking a look at that. And then I want to do a little brief peek at some of the features that are on the roadmap. And this is going to be higher level, but these are roadmap features going out for about the first half of 2019 for collaborative networks in Alma. And then the last thing, which I think is probably what most of you are here for, unless I'm totally misreading what people would come to the session for, is the Primo VE for Consortia demo. We'll talk about the general concepts of Primo VE as they relate to Alma, but what is really exciting that's going on right now is we have several consortia that are in implementation that are working with us as development partners for Primo VE. And we will take a look at what the features look like for that. And I think that's a good way to kind of wrap up the discussion, because a lot of what we're thinking about, especially as it pertains to the roadmap, has very close connections to the idea of discovery in a consortial setting. So I assumed here that the audience today will probably be a mix of people who are live on Alma and maybe some people who are in implementation. So I'm going to try to pitch it at the right kind of level of knowledge and expertise, but we'll have time for Q&A at the end. I know that the schedule, at least the version I saw, listed this as a pretty long session. We have up to 90 minutes if we want to spend that much time. I don't expect to be talking for 90 minutes because I didn't think anybody wanted to come in first thing on Saturday morning and hear me talk about collaborative networks for 90 minutes. But we have that much time should we need it. So all that being said, let's get started. The first thing that I want to talk about is new and recently developed features for collaborative networks in Alma. And I have kind of a list here. What take a look at some of these very quickly, but I did want to talk through them before we go and take a look at a live demo. As of the March 2018 release, we're going roughly in sort of, I guess, reverse chronological order. We're starting with a newer feature and moving into some slightly older things. We have the ability now, is anybody here from a consortium that has a network zone in Alma? Okay, a couple people, so I won't dwell on this too much. This is for sort of a specific situation-wide system, and the state has a student information system that contains information about all of the students in the public higher education system. What you can do is, instead of loading your patron example of one of the principles of the network zone, and one of the things that makes it really great for certain types of consortia is the ability to do something once at a central level, and then the people at the institutions don't necessarily have to worry about maintaining that file or maintaining that integration. It's taken care of by the central office. So as I said, this is one that has a specific use case, but that is fairly common, both here in North America and also in the other regions of the world. Something that I have to remind myself of constantly is sometimes there are these features that at first don't make much sense to me, And then one of my colleagues somewhere else will say, well, you know, that's very common in whatever region they're in Germany or something like that. So there are a lot of features that have different use cases for different libraries in different regions. So the network zone patron file is a really nice one. There has been also a range of fulfillment network functionality improvements since about late 2017. And this continues. When we get to the roadmap phase, we'll talk about some of the directions that they're moving in for development of the fulfillment network within the next year or so. But what's been going on in the last 6 months is we have the ability now to see the patron's network activity. That was something that's very important. If I am at a member library of a consortium and my patron comes up to the desk and says, I think I have an overdue book and I'm getting these notices from a different library, you want to be able to look and see what they have checked out. I used to be a circulation supervisor, so this is a familiar scenario to me. There's only so much control you might have over their loan for another library's item, but at least you can tell them, yes, this is not an error, the book is in fact overdue, you should bring it back. There's also now the ability to do a little bit more specific work with defining the ID types that you would use for users. So to say there's this specific common ID type that we want everybody to have. And also to say that you can expose users to the fulfillment network depending on the type of identifier that they have on their record. So I could say only users in my system who have a certain type of university-issued identifier marked on their record will be exposed to the fulfillment network. What do I mean by that? That's a little bit abstract. We have this ability in Alma to say certain user groups can take part in the fulfillment network, certain users can take part in it, and others cannot. So we could say based on some sort of identifier in the record, we're exposing users to the network or not. And that's actually coming in the July release. So we're sort of, the July release is in the sandboxes now, but hasn't yet gone out to production. So that's a teeny bit of a preview, but it's a feature that's been developed. This next one about distributing general electronic services from the network zone is an interesting feature. There is the ability to set many things at the network level and then distribute them out to the institutions. And the general electronic services, as many of us probably know, are these linking features or electronic services that we can make available to patrons in Primo. One of the things that the network office could do is say, we're going to set up some of the really commonly used ones in the consortium and make them available to you at the network level. So this is an example of that. Again, the ability to set things centrally, excuse me, and then distribute them out. The same thing with the fulfillment units. We can set up definitions of fulfillment units at the network level and have those be inherited by the member institutions. This is one that has some really interesting applications if you're part of a fulfillment network, that you have the ability to set some common rules and have those be distributed from the network zone. So that's something that's been around for about 6 months now as of the November release last year. And then another good one is the ability to distribute role profiles and assignment rules from the network zone. The ability to assemble profiles or templates of user roles in Alma is one of my favorite features because it's something I think many of us gravitate to these things in Alma that we really like because they would have solved a problem that we had a long time ago. And I had a situation in a library where I worked many years ago where we suddenly realized 2 people retired right before Christmas break. We got back and we realized nobody had the level of access that they had had in circulation, and there were all these problems. And I had to sit down with our systems guy and basically take apart everybody's permissions and put them back together. It took 2 weeks. So having the ability to really easily see people's roles and then assign them by profile is one of my favorite Alma features. And in a network zone, you now have the ability to set those profiles and the assignment rules at the network level. The one that I wanted to show you in a demo, and of course we can take a look at some of these other things, the one that I really want to talk about And C in the system is, there's this kind of broad concept of what we refer to as complex deal support. And that means, this is mainly talking about electronic resources and something called the negotiation license in the network zone that some of you may be familiar with. So this is the ability to make a note at the network level. This is a license that is used by everybody, and this is the content per member with the prices that's attached to that license. This is great for systems that have a central office that does a lot of negotiation on behalf of the members, and would even say, okay, this is what we have negotiated for you, this is how much it will cost, and this is the license. So let's take a look at what that looks like, and let's hope that we don't lose the projector in the process. Okay, this is good. So the first thing that I want to show you is if we go into our network zone here in Alma, and we're going to get logged in as the super user to the network zone, and we'll be able to look at some licenses. So here we are. I'll just back up a step and say that, especially for those of us who may not be as familiar with the concept, the network zone is this sort of consortial connecting piece for institutions that use Alma together in a certain way. Not all consortia use a network zone in an Alma environment, but some do. In our imaginary consortium, and it is for the CRKN collections, and I don't remember exactly what CRKN stands for, but it's a Canadian research library organization. So we have here, let's look at this license. This is the CRKN negotiation license, and the license type is negotiation. And what that allows us to do is to say, this is a license that has specific details for each member, and it's one that represents something that the consortium has set up on behalf of the members. We can see that this one has been active for several years and is active for several years more here. And if we go in and take a look, we can edit the license, and I'll show you a couple of interesting things that are going on here. First of all, there's a checkbox here that we will return to that says this is a shared license. What that means is that the license record itself has been established at the network level, and I will have the ability to distribute it out to the institutions in the network. This is a really interesting concept that we can kind of separate from the idea of the negotiated license to some extent and say the consortium might be able to establish licenses if we all agree to some sort of common terms. Even if we're not necessarily purchasing the content together, the consortium could establish a license and share it with everybody, again, eliminating the need for some of the local libraries to do heavy lifting in the area of licensing. This is great if you're part of a smaller library, maybe that's a member of a big consortium. The consortium can take on that work on behalf of the members. I want to show you that we have this negotiation details tab here. And this is where things get really interesting. We have our members of the consortium and the negotiated license listed here. And we have the price per year. For each member, we can record a price increase percentage annually. And then we can see the start and end date for these collections. And what's especially interesting is the available content. So I may negotiate a fairly large package or a large deal on behalf of the members, but maybe some of my members have purchased or wish to purchase a different subset of content from the others. I may be in a consortium that has a mix of research libraries and other libraries that don't have quite the same needs, but maybe negotiating from the same provider. So you notice here, in our imaginary consortium, some of you may be familiar with our imaginary consortium from demos and things like that. But we have our kind of big fish member here, Alma University, has all of the content that's available for this package. And then the other members only have one of the two collections that we've attached to this license. So I can set specific details per member, and we can even see what that looks like. for this member. So we have the price per year, the renewal cycle. I can list the collections that I want to make available to this member. I can even have specific contact people noted here. So, oh look, I am the contact for Alma University in case they need to get a hold of me. So this is, again, looking at this record from the perspective of the central office, what we can see for all of the members. We can see the specific for the members as part of this license. Let's go back here to license record. And what I want to do next is I want to now go into one of the member institutions, into Alma University, and see what this looks like from the perspective of the member library in the institution. So I am now going to log in as myself and hopefully get my password correct. And we will get into Alma University here. And so now you can see, let's look, I was looking at licenses recently, so we'll just click on the licenses page from the Alma Recent Pages menu. I want to point out that we don't actually see this, oh, we do see the negotiation license here. Okay, I thought I had not shared it, but apparently I did. I was going to share it in front of everybody and we'd see it appear, but I guess when I was testing it, I actually did share it. But this is an interesting point here. We can see that it says this has been shared. So we know that this comes from the network zone. And then if I click on this attempting to edit this, this is important. I cannot actually edit this license because it's just been shared with me. I don't have the privileges. The central office hasn't given me edit access to the license. I can see the terms because these terms apply to things that I have paid for on behalf of my patrons, but I can't actually edit the license terms from here. I can just view them. And I can see how they might apply to my patrons. If I am thinking about purchasing a collection that's attached to this license, let's take a look. And if we go and we search for the CRKN collections, and I know, maybe somebody from the network zone has called me and said the collections from CRKN are available. You can find them in the network zone. I search in the network zone, and here are those two collections that match my search terms, and I can see where it says available for, that they are available for me. I'm part of Alma University from the network zone. I can go and establish my local order record for this, and when I set this up, my electronic collection subscription, purchase order line owner will be the main library. Let's hit create purchase order line, and we will be able to see, this is one of my favorite parts. Let me just take a sip of water while Alma's thinking. A couple of things have been inherited on the purchase order line from that negotiation license that was established at the network level. The license itself is here, and if I click on View License, I will be able to see the license terms that apply to this collection coming from the central office. And I can even see, let's click back on that because I forgot to point something out, the negotiation details are available to me here. If we close out of that and we scroll down, we can see that the price has also been applied to this coming from the negotiated license. So it's easy to see what I am getting here with this license that comes from the consortium. So this is a really nice feature for anybody who's part of a consortium that uses the network zone and has a central office that negotiates a lot of electronic resource purchases on behalf of the members. And I know, thinking of some of the consortia that I've worked with, and to point out as being especially important. Jumping just quickly back over to the slide deck, did anybody have questions about any of these other features I get so nervous using PowerPoint on a projector because when you switch applications and you're on a projector, crazy things can happen. Does anyone have questions about any of these other ones that we kind of talked through? Yes?
You said something about setting the shared policies on the fulfillment from the network, so I assume we can also set our own?
Of course, yes, you can always.
Assume that, but I do like to assume.
Yes, I'll repeat the question because we're in a room that's big enough that I think that maybe not everyone can hear. The question was, so if you have the ability to set up shared fulfillment networks that are distributed from the network zone, do you still also have the ability to create your own fulfillment units at the local level? Yes, you absolutely do. And I think it's common in a situation like that. If let's take a look at what this looks like from the Alma side. I am here at the network level. If I go into my Alma configuration menu and we look at fulfillment units, I have a number of fulfillment units here that I've defined at the network level. And I can add a fulfillment unit from here. I can edit the fulfillment units. But if I go and I look at Alma University, so now I am back at Alma University, and we take a look at fulfillment in our configuration menu, we can see fulfillment units here. We have more. We have 8 here as opposed to 7 from the network zone. And these are owned by, you can see it says institution, which means it's not actually coming from the network zone. And we are configuring Alma University here. So it is always possible to have your own local fulfillment units, but it is a nice feature to be able to set something centrally, should you want to do that. Yes, you'd always have the ability to work with local fulfillment units. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, if you're not involved in a network zone, but you are involved with a consortium that licenses for the group, is it possible for those features to be incorporated for the individual library? And with a follow-up, in most cases, there's a general license,
Right.
and you sign an agreement to that license. And can that agreement be incorporated into what you load for the license?
So like an amendment to the general.
It is an amendment, and in most cases, when you keep buying from that publisher, you're getting many amendments.
Right.
And how do you eliminate them?
Okay, so this is kind of a multi-layered question. Yeah. So I'll repeat the question again for those of you who didn't hear it. Grace Mary was asking about institutions that may be part of a consortium that doesn't have a network zone. Some of what we sometimes call buying club consortia, something like Neural. Yeah, Neural is the classic example of that in my mind. And how would you be able to take advantage of any of the features that we saw just now for the negotiated license? As of today, the answer to that is no. I would really like to see some of that functionality become available. We do have the ability in a number of areas in Alma to share work that we've done, to sort of use the community zone concept. I think in the realm of licensing, there are some concerns, like legal and confidentiality concerns that some people have, but put those collections in the community zone, and at least you'd have access to the collection levels, but the collection records rather. The licensing is a slightly different animal.
Yeah. They post a very similar, very similar information on the consortium manager.
Right.
It's all of the schools, all of their pricing, et cetera. So it's there.
Yeah, I know it's there, and I think we would need to figure out a way to do that without necessarily having to use the network zone functionality. I can look into it and see what they're thinking about. Because even as I was talking, I was thinking, we see a really diverse set of consortia using Alma today, and of course not everybody's using a network zone. And some people may be part of multiple groups that purchase packages, so we need to be able to take that into account. I think especially, In certain parts of the country, that's really common. I'll look into some of what they may have in mind for that in the future. But what we saw just now was sort of aimed at a certain type of consortium, but maybe not others. In terms of licenses, I mean, you can always put as many amendments as you want on the license. If we take a look at one of our licenses here, let's go and just take a look at this one. You could add a number of different amendments to the license. So that's kind of a basic thing that can be done regardless of what kind of license it is. That's something you can do. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the next section, which is a brief discussion of some of the roadmap features for consortial collaboration. So one of the things that is coming that I'm personally excited about is if any of you are in a consortium that uses the resource sharing network functionality, is anybody here part of? Okay, we have at least 1, 2, or 3 people. Okay. So there are, to take a bit of a step back and put this in context for everybody, we have a couple of different models for consortial borrowing in Alma. The resource sharing network is the one that was, this is the older model, or the one that was originally developed, where you can use resource sharing or ILL protocols to work with shared consortial materials or to borrow materials from other libraries in the consortium. There's also the fulfillment network, which is more of a direct requesting model. That is something that is being implemented more often today, but is not always the right answer for everybody for various reasons. Mainly having to do with, if you hate direct requesting, then you don't want to be part of a fulfillment network. I'll just put that out there. If you have restrictions on how you can share certain types of patron information, the resource sharing network is often a better bet. And the groups that we work with that use a resource sharing network, often that is the reason that they do it. If you are part of, or if you use Alma resource sharing in any way, we're working on developing better locate processes, locate profiles and rules for electronic resources. This is being done in partnership with a consortium in Hong Kong that has some interesting needs surrounding consortial use of e-resources. What they've said is their patrons could literally get on the bus and go from one member institution to another and use the e-resources on site there, and they want people to know what everybody has. So we've been working with them to come up with better electronic locate processes, but I know that there are several consortia in North America that are interested in this as well. So that's coming, hopefully the second half of 2018, that will be introduced. There is some further fulfillment network streamlining. That's my wording there. I was looking at a couple of different plans that they have, and I said, well, all of this sort of falls under the realm of streamlining. What I've heard from some of the consortia that use fulfillment networks, especially the larger groups, is one of the things that you have now, and we'll see this in the Primo demo, is you have if you're on the patron side and you want to see all your different loans, you have that like big drop-down menu of all of the members. Is anyone here from Georgia? Then have to click and figure out which specific member libraries somebody might have loans from. We're working on plans that, among other things, will eliminate the need to do that. So you'll be able to better understand circulation in the fulfillment network without having to look at the specific member institutions. So for larger fulfillment networks, especially, that would be really great. Another one related to resource sharing. And this is one that I think is especially interesting for institutions that want to take part in resource sharing facilitated by Alma, but may not be part of an established network zone consortium. There will be the ability to access globally available lists of resource sharing partners and ROTAs. So this would make it possible for people to collaborate more easily in kind of an ad hoc way, to say these are institutions that have defined resource sharing configurations, want to take part in this, and there may be kind of globally established partner lists for each institution and ROTAs of those institutions. So that is coming in the first half of 2019. And if you want to take a closer look at the roadmap, which I think is something, I like to go and review several months worth of release notes at a time every so often, and the roadmap, one can do the same thing. So if I put a link here, it is on the Knowledge Center, and we will, it's launching Chrome, that's why it's taking a second. So we'll be able to see, hold on a second. We'll get out of, links in PowerPoint are so dicey. Okay. So the roadmap is here. If you go to the Knowledge Center and you click on Alma, under Product Materials, Roadmap, the Roadmap Highlights document is a good one to look at if you want to see some more features, not just related to consortial collaboration. So the next thing that I want to do is talk about, Primo V for consortia. I hear people say both Primo V and Primo VE. So to clear things up, say what you want. You can call it whatever you want, and it doesn't stand for anything. It's like the car models where you can get the a Camry and it's like a V or a VL or something like that. It doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of looks nice. It can mean whatever you want it to mean. But whatever you want to call this thing, it is in development right now. It will go live with the Washington Research Library Consortium in July, WRC. They're in the DC metro area, a number of different research libraries. And also the MinPals Consortium in Minnesota is the So this is new to pretty much everybody. So let's take a look here. There are other things that are important for consortia in Primo. But what I think, and this is maybe sort of a Captain Obvious statement here, if you are an individual member institution in a consortium, a lot of the time your needs as the individual library are very similar to a standalone library using online Primo. You need to make your local resources discoverable to patrons. You need to balance that with this kind of massive flood of central index content. You want to make sure that your discovery experience really feels local and that you can customize it. So that is something that, regardless of whether you're in a consortium, is important. I always think it's interesting to take a look at Primo sites set up by different libraries in the same consortium and see how people have often made choices from one member to the next that are radically at odds with each other. You could make a sort of total opposite design choice and still be part of the same group of libraries. So it's important to think about this kind of the ability to maintain some autonomy, but also have to work together to make certain consortial resources and services available to patrons. So some of the main principles of this, let's talk through each of these. We need to have metadata management at the institution level, as well as at the network. So you need to be able to manage your own metadata locally at the institution level, but also have access to network level metadata records. You need to be able to search your member institution as well as the entire network. So I need to be able to say what's available here, what's available at the consortium. And we need to have a simple setup and seamless publishing processes. And that whole idea of publishing, if anybody here is familiar with the classic Primo with pipes, pipes go away with Primo V. So there's no need to worry about writing your pipes anymore and dealing with some of the whole concept of publishing goes away, because really what this is a redeployment of Primo on the Alma platform. And if you kind of know the classic Primo and then you start to work with Primo V, what I realized, I had this kind of light bulb moment in a meeting a few months ago, and I wanted to stand up and like shout it out to everybody, but that felt sort of, even within the Ex Libris culture where we all kind of yell at once, that felt a little bit much. But I had this light bulb moment where I realized they have re-architected this in such a way that if I'm a patron, I shouldn't have any knowledge of that. It'll work the same way, it'll look the same way to me, but from the staff perspective, the way it works in the back end is quite different. So the whole idea of having to publish records out of Alma or out of the ILS into Primo goes away when you have it running on the same platform as the backend ILS. And something that is coming soon, and this is a little bit more technical, will be the ability to work with normalization rules per institution in the consortial Primo V environment. That will be coming soon. Let's talk about some of the specific functionality that we need for Consortial Primo. We need the ability to set search scope configuration. I can group together multiple search scopes to create a unique view in my Primo institution. But going along with that idea of autonomy where you need it and collaboration where you want it in a consortium, you need the ability to set the search scopes on a per institution basis. This is another thing that I always look at when I look at consortial member libraries is what are their search scopes? What did they choose as the default? Does the library down the street that's part of the same consortium have the same search scopes? The answer to that one is often no. You need to be able to search your own records, whether they're linked to the network zone or their local records. And also you need the ability to search across the whole consortium. And of course, everybody needs to be able to find their own Primo Central Index content. Our subscriptions may not be the same, even in an environment where everybody has a lot of consortial shared subscriptions coming from the network. I need to be able to say, well, my patrons have access to exactly this and not that. We also need to have the search results, the ability to work with facets that will allow patrons to limit their view to certain institutions or libraries. That's important as well. On the full record, when we search for something in Primo, we need to have the ability to see the holdings of your own library, to place requests to your institution, and also through other institutions as part of this process. And this is the part that Primo V has been out in the wild for about a year now, but the part that involves working with the other institutions' holdings is basically the part that needed to be developed for consortia because it's a little bit more complicated. We also need to allow direct requesting for fulfillment networks in cases where those exist. And we also have the library card functionality or the My Account functionality in Primo that's very important. We need to be able to see we need to be able to give the patron the ability to see all of their loans, requests, fines, and so on from their home institution, and also for users that are linked to other institutions in the network, the ability to see their information, their activity from the other member institutions. What I want to do now is I want to do a quick live demo of this functionality. So what I'm going to do here is we're loading, this is actually a Primo demo site that sits on top of our Alma demo. So this is the Alma University Primo V demo site. We saw Alma University, they were one of the member libraries in our Imaginary Consortium, and this is their Primo V demo. So what we're seeing here is sort of, this will be a preview of some functionality that is going live really in the wild in the next month or so. So what we have is we have the ability to, as the default here, which is not necessarily visible, let's do a search here. Our default search scope is the Alma Consortium. You can see here in the autocomplete, I have, that is what has come up. So I can see that we have a couple of things that I want to point out. We have the network zone level. This is just to refresh your memory about the architecture of our consortium. We are a consortium with 3 institutions in a network zone. And we can see that we have this institution facet is one of the main new features of Primo V for consortia, is the ability to say, I want to see what is available on a per institution basis at the members of the consortium. So we can see 4 things that are from Alma University, 2 at Open University, and 3 at the University of Knowledge. As always, I can click on a facet, and then it will redo my search, and I can make my facets sticky. This is a nice feature that we brought over from Summon, so if anybody here is a Summon fan, this is something you'll know and love, is the ability to make the facets sticky. But that's something that we can do here. So let's actually go back, because what I want to show you is what will happen if I sign in as a patron who is linked to Open University, which is another member of our imaginary consortial institution here. And I want to sign in and as a patron called Erin Miller. Some of you may be familiar with Sarah Carr. She's our favorite imaginary demo patron. I have this kind of like scenario in my head where Erin Miller is her roommate or something, and they're friends and they go to the library together. So this is Sarah Carr's friend, and she wants to request this book called War Games, From Gladiators to Gigabytes. Let's go in and look at the record here. So I can see that for one thing, it looks like it actually is available at my institution, but I can also see that it's available at another institution in the network. Here it is available at the Central Library, and it's in place. I can place a request for the item, and it will come to me as part of the fulfillment network at Alma University. So this is an important thing. I want to say, let's see, we'll just send the request here, and the pickup location has been limited to the main library as part of the fulfillment network configuration. I'm picking it up at Alma University, and I want to click send request, and it will send the request, and I will get this item. This is kind of in keeping with the idea that for most patrons, they just want a copy of the book. They're not particularly interested in where it comes from. They're just like, get me this book, and I want to be able to come to the library and get it. Most people are not particularly invested in picking, copy 2 from a specific other institution. They just want to be able to place their request. So that's what we saw here. This register link, which I believe is not yet active in our demo environment, would allow patrons who don't yet have a linked account at another member institution to automatically do that as part of the discovery process here. So that's an important feature. The way that the fulfillment network works is by having basically a copy of the patron account shared with the other member institution. And rather than saying to people, you need to go physically in person and do that, this allows them to set up the registration for the linked account right here. An important thing to know about the fulfillment network, which is Alma functionality, is that you don't need a network zone. Fulfillment network is something that you have the ability to use without being part of a network zone. I want to briefly jump into Alma University here on the back end and show you what Primo V looks like from the configuration side, because I think, those of us who are real kind of, discovery nerds, that what you're seeing as the patron is part of the story, but not the whole story. So I'm logged into Alma. This is the library, whose Primo we were just looking at, and I can see that in my menus across the top of the page, where I didn't used to have an option for discovery, now in a Primo V environment, I have this section of my Alma menu that says discovery. And there are a number of different things that I can configure from the discovery menu here that before I would have had to go into the Primo back office to work with. So I want to point out a couple things while we are here. Let's take a look at our search profiles. This is where I can set up my search scopes for my institution here. And you'll notice that there is a search scope that's called Discovery Network, and it says all libraries. So this is all of my records in my network, my consortium that's sharing a discovery environment. That's an important configuration choice. If I go back up to the menu and we look at the ability to configure views, we just have one view set up from our institution here, but let's edit this. And we can see here that there are a couple of things that are related to the consortium. I do want to point out, though, that it is very easy to say, where do I want my facets or the tweak my results sidebar? Do I want it on the right or do I want it on the left? That's a drop-down menu. The default for the new UI, as I think many of us know, is to have the facets on the right. If you feel very strongly that they should be back on the left-hand side of the page, all you need to do in a Primo V setting is to go and click on the left. So that's a good thing to be aware of. I want to point out that we have this Discovery Network Settings box here. And this allows me to display locations from member institutions, to include the member institution's physical inventory in the facet or not. And then, do I display member libraries or not in my discovery settings here for the consortium? So that's something that's easy to control as well. And you can have multiple views, of course, in a Primo environment. So if you want to have a view that doesn't include this at all for whatever reason, you can do that. Scrolling back up, we have other things that we can control from the view here. The links menu can be specific to a view. The search profile slots that you might work with can be specific to a view as well. And we can also set up different import profiles for discovery. So if you're working with non-Alma data sources, that's something that's easy to set up here. The resource recommender configuration, and even the ability to work with the Primo Central Index is something you could just click on here to get into Primo Central. That's considerably easier than it was in the classic Primo with the back office. But something that I want to show you, because my favorite thing about Primo V, and I think even for people who are not strictly thinking about it in a consortial setting, is sit around waiting for a pipe to run, right? I mean, nobody wants to wait 6 hours or overnight, even several days or a week or more to see changes made to records. I used to work with course reserves in a past life, and this is especially important for course reserves, but it's of course not the only time when you want to make sure that people can see things. So let's find a record. We're going to make a very simple change to a title, a record. It's interesting, this is an example, a demo example that I've been using a lot, and I realize that it's actually kind of a local title here to the New Orleans Gulf Coast area. If anybody hasn't read this book, it's really good, but it's kind of a harrowing read. So it's not exactly beach reading, but it's very good. So let's say I want to make a change to this record. We'll go in, and actually first, what I want to show you is we have this display and discovery option. This is a new feature to Primo V that allows us to pull up the record exactly as a patron would see it. From when I'm working in Alma, I can say, I want to pull up the record in Discovery and see what the patron is seeing. This, again, for me, putting on my public services hat is something that I really like, because when I used to work at the reference desk helping patrons, I would always want to know, what exactly are you looking at? And then I want to go in and replicate that so I can understand what you're seeing. Let's say it has come to my attention, we're going to make a small change here. It's come to my attention that this book is actually 290 pages long and not 288 pages. I'll point out here, it says 288 pages. And I want to make a change to say that it's actually 290 pages. So let's go back over into Alma. I'll click on the record. And I actually want to edit this record, but let's look down here and see 288 pages. We'll edit the record, and it will bring this up in the metadata editor, and we'll be able to make a small change to this record. Let's see, Alma's thinking here. We might need to go back and go into this again. All right, we'll edit the record and make the change that we want to make. It needs more coffee, I think. Does anyone have, oh, here we go. I was gonna say if anyone has questions. Okay, 288 pages. It's now gonna be 290 pages. I am saving the record. And we'll be able to see, once this record saves, it will say 290 pages. And then we'll take another look at it on the Primo side, and we'll see that it has changed on the Primo side. Does anyone have questions while Alma is thinking? Yes?
On the classic one that you were talking about a little bit earlier, the changes don't show up right away?
They don't, no.
It takes like overnight or whatever it's
How-
set up for.
However often you set it to publish in the Classic Primo is how long it will take the changes to show up to however often it runs. Does your library use Primo today?
No.
Okay.
They have our data. We're in the midst of transferring.
Okay. If you are migrating to, are you going to Alma at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. So then you are very likely to be migrating to Primo V, where the publishing lag is not an issue. So that's important to know. That is the default now for anybody who moves to Alma is to move to Primo V. So what we're looking at here, we can see our record, we've saved it 290 pages. Let's exit. And I guess I want to release this record. So now we can see down here, 190 pages. Let's go back. And if we go and we click on Display and Discovery again, it will bring up this record and our change that we just made will be visible. Scrolling down, it's now 290 pages. So that's a small change of the type that, probably in real life, you're not making changes to the page counts. But I've done this, I have done things like add or remove a description or a table of contents. I changed the subject headings around on something the other day, and the process is instantaneous regardless of what change you make. So in cases where it's a really important, high visibility, heavy use record, this really kind of brings us back around to the days of the OPAC, when the OPAC was king. And one of the things that was great about the OPAC was you could say, for catalogers especially, you want to see it as patrons are seeing it, you can click back and forth. This kind of brings back the ability to do that. It brings us back around full circle into, that OPAC-like functionality of being able to see the record displayed in real time. So that kind of wraps up what I wanted to show you. I don't think I have another slide, but I do have my email address up here if anybody wants to get in touch with me with questions or anything like that. There we go. It's supposed to say thank you here. Oh. It's supposed to say thank you above my email address, but thank you. So I'm happy to stick around for questions. We're going to answer questions right now if anybody has questions. If you think of anything later, that is how to get in touch with me. But again, I want to thank you all for spending some time with me this morning, going over these new features in Alma and thinking a little bit about Primo in a consortial discovery setting. So thanks, everybody. Yes, questions? Yeah.
So with VP,
Yeah.
is there a chart of when you're making changes in different components that tells you the time frame for the change? In other words, in VP now, you're editing metadata, it's instantaneous.
Right.